We just want to show that support to light up our community in a time of crisis and a time of darkness. Let the youth know that we're here.
Tonight, a candlelight vigil in Maskwacis to remember those that have taken their own lives and to say there is hope.
It shows that despite dialogue and language centered around reconciliation, that it is still business as usual.
As opponents keep up the pressure to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the company behind the project continues to build.
I think this is a good opportunity to sort of change the view of what the arts means and the economic value of the arts in the North.
And artists who were asked to perform at this year's Arctic Winter Games for free say no pay, no play. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Canada's top court is diving deep into the duty to consult issue. Indigenous groups are challenging the way federal legislation is drafted. Here's Annette Francis with more.
Today's hearing at the Supreme Court brought together interveners for both sides from across the country. According to lawyer Robert Janes, it's a case of national importance. He's hoping it'll change the way rules are made.
The reality is right now governments can pick or choose whether they consult about legislation. So it could be a law that directly hits reserves, a law that directly hits hunting or trapping rights, fishing rights. And as things stand right now, governments can pick and choose if they want to consult.
Janes represents the Mikisew Cree First Nation. The case began as a result of the Conservative government's two omnibus bills, proposing changes to Canada's environmental protection and regulatory processes. The Mikisew Cree First Nation claims the changes to Bill C-38 and C-45 were likely to affect treaty rights, and the government has a constitutional duty to consult.
Based on what's happened with the duty to consult in other cases, we see this as a real chance to get First Nations inside of the decision-making process, so they have a real say in how legislation is formed, how First Nations interests are considered in legislation, so that we're not always in this battle where the legislation gets passed and then afterwards we have a big fight about how to fix it or how it affects rights.
7 Indigenous groups also had their voices heard in support of the claim, and 5 provincial attorney generals argued on the side of the Crown.
That the Crown should be really stepping up to do the right thing and recognize that it has to be accountable. And I think that was what was a bit disappointing about hearing from some of the other interveners acting on behalf of the government. They really put forward a view of the Crown's accountability for what it does, the Crown's responsibility for what it does, that really comes straight out of the 19th century. And I live in hope that the court will make a ruling that's more suitable for the 21st century.
A decision is expected within 6 months. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And NDPMP and St. Anne's residential school survivors are accusing Ottawa of stonewalling their testimony. Happened at a rally and press conference today in the nation's capital. As APTN's Todd Lamoran reports, the independent assessment process failed these survivors.
Angela Shishish and nearly 3 dozen others rallied in front of the Department of Justice.
I can hear her terrible crying. The way they did to my dear sister, Sophie, as she was tortured. Now, who can do that to a human being?
She was there to support Stella Chapman, who was abused by an older student.
St. Anne's was an evil place, and I was always afraid at that school. I was so glad to finally leave there, and when they closed the school. I kept the abuse secret, and I suffered inside myself for over many years.
Chapman decided to have her story heard at an independent assessment process hearing in 2013.
However, my case got thrown out because the government said I did not have evidence about that adult supervisors at St. Anne's knew about sexual abuse.
She successfully got her case reopened, but according to NDP MP Charlie Angus, thousands of documents and the testimony of others that could benefit her in another hearing have been withheld by the federal government.
And fight right to the bitter end until we have to get to extreme measures in order to turn over documents. So it took an extraordinary intervention on Friday to get them to turn over what she needed for her hearings. And what was in those documents? The proof all along that what she said was true.
Last Friday morning, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett issued a statement that documents had been supplied without exception. The government had waived privilege over them, won't seek costs against applicants, and had even reached out to survivors.
She claimed that she had reached out to the survivors when she hadn't. Why misrepresent this? This is about truth and reconciliation. This is about the honor of this government and the promise of this Prime Minister. I do not understand why they continue to play these tactics of misinformation.
Angus said the government reached a settlement with Chapman on Friday, but only after the government was shamed into doing so, he says. Angus doesn't know how many St. Anne's cases were thrown out because the government sat on important evidence.
Certainly through word of mouth, we hear of people who say, I went to those, and they got the justice that they expected from a white government. They had their cases thrown out and people walked away.
Shishish hopes her testimony can help other survivors who reopen IAP cases.
I know what they did to the children.
But Ontario Superior Court Justice Paul Perel ruled earlier this month the government can continue to reject transcripts in one-on-one cases. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And we would like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. In Alberta, the community of Maskwacis held a candlelight vigil and walk to honor those that have recently taken their own lives. And as Chris Stewart reports, they also have a message of hope.
The community of Maskwacis, a community about an hour south of Edmonton, consists of 4 nations. Since the end of November, they have seen at least 11 people, mostly youth, take their lives. Sherry Green wants young people to know that help is available. She decided to organize a candlelight vigil in Simpson Cree Nation, who have lost the most to suicide.
We just want to show that support to light up our community in a time of crisis and a time of darkness. Let the youth know that we're here, and everybody on all levels. There's leadership, there's grassroots people, there's departments that are all trying their best. Everybody's trying their best to try to raise awareness.
Green says today is about coming together to honor those who have fallen and to start talking about how best to help young people in danger. She says until recently, not enough has been done to stop young people taking their lives.
We have leadership that are coming here today to help support everybody agrees that we need that unity, and right now it's not happening.
Activist Sevi Rabbit is from Maskwacis and was invited to speak. She knows the pain of loss. She has lost family members to suicide.
There's been a lot of deaths in the community of Simpson Cree Nation, and not just Simpson, but all 4 nations. And we're here to come together as a community and support the families that have been suffering lately, and then hopefully break the cycle of violence.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Simpson Cree Nation, Alberta.
The public inquiry into relations between Indigenous peoples and certain public sectors resumed in Val-d'Or, Quebec today. University of Ottawa professor Aimee Kraft spoke about the differences between Canadian law and Indigenous legal traditions. She believes that both systems can be used through legal pluralism, which means 2 systems working side by side equally. For her, working within the framework found in the TRC report can lead to reconciliation.
The Commission says these 2 concepts are very important in terms of revitalizing Aboriginal legal systems. Aboriginal people must become the architects and the interpreters of their own laws.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll get the latest in the standoff over Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline project. Here's the rest of Tuesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny and -5 in Peace River. A spring day for the southern part of the province, 11 above in Calgary, +6 under the sun in Lethbridge. Rain for much of the west coast, 8 above in Tofino, +9 in Vancouver, +8 in Sandspit and Prince Rupert, -2 in Prince George. Mild in parts of Yukon, 0 in Rock River, +1 in Whitehorse. Over to NWT, -15 in Fort Simpson and Fort Resolution. Warmer to the north, -4 in Pawlatuck, -7 in Snow in Tuktoyaktuk. Warmer in parts of Nunavut than it is on the prairies, -12 or 13 in Arviette and Baker Lake, -28 in Igloolik on Tuesday, sunny, and -30 in Resolute. Welcome back. Oil giant Kinder Morgan wants to increase the flow of their pipeline from Alberta to British Columbia. The Trans Mountain Pipeline has been given the go-ahead by the federal government, but in BC there is fierce opposition to the project. There are several lawsuits going on trying to stop it. But as Lori Hamlin reports, while Kinder Morgan can't build the pipeline, they are building the infrastructure that will support it.
This is Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain oil tanker terminal. It's located in Burnaby, just outside the city of Vancouver. It's surrounded by a 10-foot floating razor wire fence. The Texas oil giant calls it a construction safety boom, but opposers to the project say it's a statement.
It shows that despite dialogue and language centered around reconciliation, that it is still business as usual.
This terminal is the end of the line for the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which runs from Alberta. Oil tankers will come here to pick up oil and then head off to markets in Asia. Problem is, tripling the tanker traffic in these waters increases the chances of an oil spill. The federal government has given the approval for the pipeline, but construction cannot begin until all legal challenges have gone through the courts.
The issue continues to percolate, so to speak. I believe there are 19 lawsuits, 12 of which are First Nations. Right now, as the days grow longer, all of the variety, the multitude of groups that are opposed to the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline are beginning to reach out and network, and we've described it as Battleground 2018.
But as the pipeline weaves its way through the courts, the company can build at this terminal and the tank farm. Councillor Sav Dhaliwal is worried about what could happen if the tank farm catches fire. He says the city of Burnaby will use every legal mechanism they have to stop the project.
Burnaby is 250,000 people now. But if you look at the region, there's 2 million people now. We're going to live in this fear of every morning that nothing happens to this.
Outside of court, activists all across BC are organizing in many different ways. Candice Campo, a Kai activist with the Seawolves in Vancouver, believes efforts to hinder the project are working.
I really do believe that collective voice in action is contributing to accomplishing, putting a halt to the expansion of the project, and I do have hope, and I believe that continuing keeping the message in the public and the awareness of our concerns as issues, that it's all positive steps.
Grand Chief Stuart Phillips says the hope here in BC is that the oil giant will eventually cut their losses and walk away.
I'm convinced there will be a tipping point where Kinder Morgan is going to have to really take a hard look at this project, and I think their board of directors will reach a point where they say it's not worth it. This is not a viable project.
We requested an interview with the company, but they did not respond. Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Every community in Nunavut is a flying community, and every community uses a diesel generator to keep the lights on. Today, the feds kicked in help to lower the high cost of heating for the city of Iqaluit. Iqaluit's swimming pool has been open for almost 1 year, and Indigenous and Northern Affairs Minister Carolyn Bennett was on hand to announce funding for an energy-saving project, with excess heat from the power plant in Iqaluit being used to heat the pool, saving on diesel and costs. They don't have a final price tag, but the federal government has spent $72,000 on a study that shows it can be done.
The city will be saving 155,000 liters of imported heating fuel, which means only 500 tons of CO2 a year, that nearly 500 tons of CO2 a year that does not go into the atmosphere. So,
for Indigenous peoples, trapping animals has been part of daily life for centuries. The art has been passed down from generation to generation, but in recent years, fewer younger people have been carrying on that tradition. In a new documentary, Sam Carney explores the importance of trapping and his own role in maintaining the tradition. Brittany Hobson brings us this story.
It takes Sam Carney a couple of attempts to set up this steel trap, but after a minute of trying, it's ready to go. The trap is a gift from his father, who has spent the past 3 decades trapping in rural Manitoba. Carney's father's fur trapping life is now the subject of his new documentary, A Life on the Line.
It's a huge, huge part of Canadian history, and there's no denying that trapping is, one of the reasons why Canada exists. It's one of the reasons why the Métis people exist. So I just felt it was important that people have an understanding that people still do this. It's not a thing that disappeared with industrialization.
In the documentary, Carney returns home to spend a season on the trap line with his father. Since he was a young boy, Carney's father has maintained a trap line in Duck Mountain Provincial Forest near their hometown of Roblin. As a teen, Carney had little interest in learning the family business. He moved to Winnipeg at 17 to pursue a career in broadcast.
My dad's been doing it 25, 26 years, so it was always kind of around, but I never really took an active role in it. He'd drag me out with him from time to time, and I just watch, and I was a teenager, like, I don't care, it's just stupid, I want to go home or whatnot, so I didn't really appreciate it.
Over the course of the documentary, Carney learns firsthand how much work goes into trapping, while at the same time learning more about his Métis background.
A lot of what I'm doing out here on the trap line, even though I'm being taught by my, European father, is what my Métis ancestors would have done.
Carney's Ukrainian on his father's side and Métis on his mother's. He says filming the documentary has given him a new sense of appreciation for what his father does, and vice versa.
We've always had a really good relationship, like me and my dad. If we didn't, we wouldn't have made this film. There's a really, really good rapport between us and everything. But I think we both kind of got more of a mutual respect for what each of us does.
A Life on the Line will air on APTN on January 16th and 19th. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And again, you can check out that documentary on APTN tomorrow night. Musicians are speaking out after the organizers of the 2018 Arctic Winter Games said they would not be receiving any compensation for the chance to play at the event. More on that coming up after the break. Here's a look at Tuesday's weather forecast, and it looks a little milder than recent days. Rain-snow mix and +5 in St. John's. A sunny 21 below in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 1 degree warmer under the sun in Nain. -16 in Val-d'Or and Saguenay. 12 below in Montreal. In southern Ontario, -4 in Toronto and Peterborough. -11 in Ottawa. Sunny and -12 in Thunder Bay, Wawa, and Sudbury. A mild 10 below for Churchill and Island Lake. -11 under the sun in the Pas. 13 below in Barons River, Gimli Harbor, and Winnipeg. Sunny across parts of Saskatchewan. -4 in Swift Current. -6 in Regina. -8 in La Ronge. -9 in Meadow Lake. Sunny and 10 below in Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. The 2018 Arctic Winter Games are just months away, but musicians north of 60 are speaking out against the request they are calling disrespectful to the arts community. Our reporter Charlotte Mort Jacobs has more.
Singer-songwriter Leela Gilday has been playing music for 25 years. But being a musician in the North has not always been easy. This week, organizers from the 2018 Arctic Winter Games made a call for Northern artists to perform unpaid at locations in Hay River and Fort Smith.
On the presenter side, if somebody requires, entertainment for the group of people that they've assembled for their conference or event or something like that, musicians have a job, and so you wouldn't ask the caterer to come and provide the catering for free because it's great exposure for them.
The AWG call to performers stated that artists would be required to arrange their own travel and accommodations out of pocket. Artists would be paid through exposure.
Everybody did a really great job.
Try not to talk at me. Jesse Wheeler, an actor from Yellowknife, went on Facebook to voice his displeasure.
Someone on Facebook said the other day, why is their work valued more than mine? I've donated my time, and actors and performers produce nothing tangible. And immediately I wrote back and was like, have you ever watched a movie or read a book or listened to a song? Like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of practice and learning.
The AWG committee addressed criticism with an online statement apologizing to the arts community. They also said artists would now be paid.
As a result, we got together with the board of directors and made the decision then to reallocate some funding to be able to pay those performers that will be local performers.
Gilday says she is hopeful that this conversation will further the discussion around arts funding in the North.
I think this is a good opportunity to sort of change the view of what the arts means and the economic value of the arts in the North, and especially in the Northwest Territories. Like, I think they really they have a different perspective in the Yukon. They've really monetized the art quite well, and they export their artists.
The Arctic Winter Games will run from March 18th to 23rd. Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
A deer that was trapped on ice at a park in Columbus, Ohio, has been rescued. The animal tried but couldn't get up on its feet on its own on the frozen, slippery surface. Firefighters, police, and park rangers went on the ice picked up the deer by all four legs. They carried it a distance away and set it on the snow. The deer was exhausted after the ordeal and wasn't moving much when they left it. They're not sure if the deer will survive. Poor deer. That's your APTN National News for this Monday. For more news at any time, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. There you'll find a web exclusive about an AFN regional chief calling on the Prime Minister to intervene in the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is set to resume next week in Yellowknife. Now, stick around. A Case for Innocence is next on APTN Investigates. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.